doing work on S59, an act relating to amendments to Vermont's open meeting law. As I stated last week, we're really trying to like hone in what we're going to do for amended language within the structure of this bill. So we're continuing to hear from stakeholders as these conversations evolve. And first up, VHFA. How are you?
Excellent. Good testimonies before 9:30. This is good for me.
Yeah, no, you're all over the place, huh?
Hi, I'm Maura Collins. For the record, I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. I spoke to this committee a few weeks ago, I think, but I was just in a box. And here I'm here. Thank you for considering our request, which, as you know, and as a reminder, was because our board does believe in good governance, and we do want to be able to take site visits to visit the affordable housing construction sites that have been approved, as well as the completed housing. Usually that means once a year we go on site and do that. So when I testified before, it was to allow an exemption for site visits. So the board could visit in tenants' apartments and all that. And that came out of the Senate with that exemption. I testified here about it just to hopefully keep that language in. I know that I had a bit of a throwaway comment, and it did become bigger of like a request from VHFA that said when site visits it said that include site visits. And I have listened to the testimony. I understand the fear of well, you could kind of structure a lot of meetings to include a site visit, and that may exempt us from too much of the hybrid requirement of open meeting law. So I hear that loud and clear, and I'm absolutely fine with dropping that request and just leaving the Senate language as it came over for that piece, which does exempt quasi-state agencies like VHFA from the hybrid piece of open meeting law. When we do site visits. I have seen the testimony from the Secretary of State's office that further expands that and speaks to when required by statute that site visits would be exempt. Our statute is silent on having site visits. Again, it's a choice we make of just our board really gets a lot out of it, as do the tenants and property owners. So as written, the Secretary of State's request wouldn't work for us because we don't have a statutory mandate to do site visits. But if there was time to keep working with the Secretary of State's office, maybe we could come up with something else. But as written, the Secretary of State's request wouldn't work for us. So the end of my testimony is to say we do not need any further changes to the section that VHFA had previously requested. What came over from the Senate works for us. And I would ask that you not accept the Secretary of State's suggestions as written, because that would not work for us. I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, thank you for that. So with the Secretary of State's office, have your organization had conversations with them about how to like maybe get this to evolve to a better place that's amenable for both? Is there a path to the language that's amenable for both?
I think the question is the timeline of the path. So the Secretary of State's office is fantastic, and we keep missing each other.
Okay.
And so yes, just today, this morning have been talking, and so I think we just need a little bit of time to figure out how that would work. And I don't know what the timeline of this bill is, so I'm sorry to turn the question back to you all, but I don't anticipate, I don't know if we could get that done today.
There is no need to do that.
Okay.
We're not in that timeline's not that compressed.
Okay.
There's time for us to do this exercise to try and find language that works for everyone.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Because I just, the things I would want to listen out for are, one, currently VHFA statute is silent on us having site visits. And I'd want to keep it that way because I need to be honest that we only take board retreats when we can afford it. And some years money's tight and we can't always get a hotel room for a 9-member board. And so I would not want our statute to change to require site visits. That would be a financial burden for us. But if our statute or this bill somehow spoke to that site visits are allowed by VHFA's board, and then the Secretary of State's language says, if site visits are allowed, it exempts the hybrid component, that would work. So yeah, I'd love to stay in communication with them. I just need a reading from you all about the timeline of where we need to get there.
We're working on it, today, but I think like optimistically, if we can, because we have other provisions we're trying to hone in.
Mhm.
So I would say early next week.
I will do my best.
Help, yeah. So. Any questions from the committee? Appreciate the time.
Of course. Thank you.
Welcome. All right. And next up, Mr. Dakota. Good to see you.
Good to see you all. Matt Cota with Meadow Hill on behalf of the Vermont Communications Union District Association. You've heard from me before. There were some specific questions earlier this week about VCUDA and about the in-person meeting requirements. So in your filing today is testimony, written testimony from Krista Shute, the Executive Director of NEK, and with me, behind me, to answer any questions and to provide an overview of why VCUDA has made this request regarding in-person requirements, compliance with open meeting law. So if it's okay with the chair, I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Krista Shute.
Please. How you doing, Krista?
Mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Worries.
Thank you. So my name is Krista Shute. As Matt mentioned, I am the executive director of NEKCV. We are a 71-member municipality communications union district of NEK Broadband and CV Fiber. So we had a merger of two communication union districts last year. I also serve on the executive committee of the Vermont Communications Union District Association, VCUDA, as well as chair of their finance committee. The purpose of my testimony is to support the VCUDA proposed amendments to the open meeting law, to provide some relevant background, and to answer any questions that you might have. As we know, the purpose of the open meeting law is to ensure that every member of the public, regardless of means, location, or access, does have access to the information and decisions being made by our public officials that may affect them. And broadband access equity is one of the main reasons that communication union districts were formed. So we understand very well the importance of equity, particularly for those who do not necessarily have access to electronic means. We meet this equity access issue in several ways. First, in addition to posting all of our meetings on our website, all meetings are distributed to town clerks to be physically posted by the town clerk. Second, every electronic meeting has access to a phone-only option. And we still have several board members who only phone in to meetings because of how poor their Wi-Fi connection, their internet connection is. We're working on that. We're gradually getting more and more of our board members are gradually becoming hooked up to fiber optic broadband. So third, and this is especially important for an entity like NEKCV, where we have 71 member towns, and because our board wants to ensure that all have access, we provide an opportunity for anyone to request a physical meeting location at their desired location with 48 hours notice for a regular meeting and 24 hours notice for a special meeting. So why have we asked for the statutory modification to create an exemption for physical meetings? Primarily, there's extremely little physical in-person attendance at any of the CUD's public meetings, such as our governing board meetings, our executive committee meeting, or our finance committee meetings. NEK Broadband and CV Fiber each had one guest attend a joint merger vote meeting. Apart from invited guests, such as members of the Vermont Communications Broadband Board staff or our contractors and potential vendors, we rarely actually have guests, even in our electronic sessions. The newer CUDs followed the lead of CEC Fiber in providing an opportunity for the public to request a physical meeting space. So in the 5 years that 9 CUDs have had 1 to 5 meetings per month that either provided an option for the public to request a physical meeting or actually provided after January 1 a physical location for attendance, no one has received a request for a public physical meeting space. Instead, we most often sit in a public space we have paid for after hours with no physical attendance. And frankly, this is not an efficient use of time, money, or fuel. So why is it a challenge for our CUDs? First, frequency. The CUDs meet often. We don't just meet, we have one CUD that meets once a quarter, but most CUDs meet more often than that. Our executive committees meet 2 to 3 times per month. Our finance committees meet 1 to 2 times per month, and our governing boards meet 1 to 3 times per quarter. Distance. Most of the CUDs have 20 or more towns. In any KCV, we have 71. So a lot more than 20 towns. And we have many towns that are as much as 2.5 hours away. So currently our physical location is at our office in the Village of Island Pond in the town of Brighton. And I'm sure most of you know just how far into the corner of the Northeast that is. For office space, most CUDs do not have office space. They must either rent or reserve space for the meetings. Because the meetings are in the evenings and primarily in rural towns, it is sometimes difficult to secure a location. Coordinating with member towns requires time and energy from 2 entities, the district and the town. So this is also not a particularly efficient use of time for either entity since members of the public do not attend in person. Staff. Most CUDs do not have staff, but rely on their operator partners. Volunteers must leave their home office to travel to a public location where they will not have access to multiple screens, etc. There is, and basically sit in that office alone rather than joining the meeting from home. Communication union districts are distinct in that we have no access to appropriated money. So we are a body politic or a municipality, which means that we can access the revenue bond market, and each member municipality contributes a volunteer representative to our governing board. But we are also a body corporate or business, which means that everything that's related to the nature of our business of providing broadband can be, and often is, put into executive session because of the disadvantage it would put the CUD at relative to its business competitors. So there's often, a great deal of the meeting that winds up in executive session. And at the same time, we strive for transparency wherever we can. Of the 9 CUDs, the 5 CUDs that provide service directly to their customers all have 20 or more towns. Of the 4 CUDs that are partnered with Consolidated Communication, all but one has 10 towns or more. Southern Vermont CUD, which only has 7 towns, also only meets once a quarter because they have completed their build. And that's the CCI, we call them the CCI CUDs. The CUDs that have partnered with CCI also have a long-term, several years from now, plan to consolidate. We understand that some concern has been expressed regarding our proposal to provide an exception for districts of more than 5 towns or 2 counties. There are 3 items I'd offer for your consideration. 1, increase the number of towns. 2, mandate that any entity using the exception provide an opportunity for the public to request a physical location with 48 hours notice. Or 3, create an exception for entities that do not receive funds generated by municipal taxing or assessment power. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Representative Hango.
Thank you. Thanks for that testimony. It clarified a few things for me, but I just want to make sure I heard you and read your testimony correctly, that you currently offer an option for a physical location with 48 hours notice for a regular meeting, and 24 hours notice for a special meeting.
That's correct. So we currently have a physical location because it's the law. So I just want to make that clear.
Okay,
And we also post, because we're a 71 town district, it's literally more than 2 hour drive to get from many of our towns up to where our physical location is. So in order to ensure everyone has access, if someone in Orange or, Washington wanted to attend a meeting physically, then they would simply email us or phone us. Both are on the agenda that's posted at the town clerks to request a physical location. And, we will find the closest physical location to wherever they're located that is available at the time of the meeting.
so that's what you currently do. You try to accommodate those requests in a location that you have not chosen ahead of time, or you already have a meeting location chosen ahead of time and you offer a second one for that person who makes the request. That's where I'm unclear what you're doing now.
Currently, we do both. So
Okay.
we have a physical location in Brighton. We're one of I don't know if I'm the only one, but we're the only one with warehouses. And so we have a warehouse and an office in Brighton. We have a warehouse and office in Danville. And so we have a staff member that sits in Brighton during these meetings. Most of the CUDs don't have offices. They may rent some space from a regional planning district, or they coordinate with the town to arrange for time. But most people, frankly, work from home and coordinate with their operators and their contractors from there. So to be clear, NEKCV offers the ability for people to request a location because we're 71 towns and we understand that not everybody can get to Brighton. And most CUDs don't have the office facilities that we have or the staffing that we have.
So my understanding is you're asking to not have the designated location for every meeting. And my other question is about the town clerks. You said they had to post physically. Does that mean post on their website or post a written copy of your agenda and your meeting minutes at the town clerk's office?
We provide our agenda to all town clerks and ask that they post it. It doesn't mean they have to post it. We ensure that our agenda is posted in at least 2 physical locations. But we ask all of our town clerks to post what we send. I can't tell you whether or not they do or not.
I thank you.
Right. Any other questions from the table? So I guess sort of you were talking about the time and energy spent trying to like identify the locations for the meetings, for your communication district and others as well. I guess it's kind of a broader question. While you're trying to like source these locations, like how much like staff time do you think goes into one of these instances when you're trying to like identify, locate, lock down, and execute the meeting under the current rule?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 answers to that question. One is none of the CUDs have had a request for a physical location. So the time that it requires to address a request, in other words, if we put in a mandate that any entity using the exception to not provide a physical location provides an opportunity for the public to request a physical location with a 48-hour notice, then that's not a burden because it's pretty rare
Fair point,
that
fair point.
if we're ever going to get one. And so the issue really is that nobody ever attends the meetings and we don't have, our governance, all of our governance is in public session, of course, right? And so, but there isn't a lot of, we have our annual meetings where governance matters because we're voting on who's on the executive committee, et cetera. But there are a great deal, most of the business that we conduct has to do with contract negotiations and where we're going to build next and things that are, not public knowledge or would put it as at a competitive disadvantage compared to like the cable companies or CCI or something like that. And so there's just a great deal of there's simply not very much interest in our meetings. But the time that it takes the issue is that a lot of these towns are small. They don't have locations that are open after hours. All of our meetings, almost all of our meetings are after hours because we have a volunteer board. We have 130 members on our board. 70, almost 70 of them are voting members. We have a few empty slots at the moment, and then we have a great deal of alternates. So does that answer your question? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, you did. And yeah, I know it was like a very broad and open one. I didn't really, the board member count was that high too. That's a lot of body mass. Okay. Well, yeah, I really appreciate the written testimony as well, because that gives us something to reflect on while we're trying to figure out how to help untwangle this twine for you folks. All right, I'm gonna just ask the table again. Any questions for Krista right now?
No,
All right, thank you.
I have a comment, but not a question. Mr. Witness.
Okay,
But are we,
feel free.
I feel like inconvenience is not a reason to exempt people or municipalities from open meeting law. I feel like these laws exist for a reason, and we are and always have been a state that has rural pockets. I understand that it's a challenge for people, but also I just feel like exempting, I mean, I know they're not a public body, but they're a municipality, right? And they are spending money that is not money that they're, it's public money that's being spent. And I just feel like the access to the decision-making and access to those meetings is vitally important. And I'm struggling with this a little bit. I get that it's inconvenient, but that doesn't seem like a reason to not do it to me.
Well, if I recall, like at my notes right here, I have something to the effect of, one of the suggestions was, to exempt the entities that don't receive public dollars.
Yeah, but it clearly says in their testimony, they're a municipality. And
Yes.
I think there's a gray area between what their public money receiving are. There's an overlap.
Can I ask what you're referring to as public money? Because we don't receive any money from taxes or assessment power of the towns.
Where do you get your money from?
It's a combination of grants that come from a lot of different sources, US Department of Agriculture.
Do they come from the state of
funds.
Vermont?
Almost all of it comes from federal funds, except for some money that has not yet come to the district. That was appropriated last year to be a match for the BEAD funds, but all of the funds that come through are federal funds.
And you don't receive any money at all from anyone in, like specifically the state of Vermont, no grants or funds from the state?
The grants that we receive flow through the state of Vermont because that's the way the federal government work. I mean, not all of them. We receive money from US Department of Agriculture that doesn't go through the state. But we receive money through the Vermont Community Broadband Board. We receive money in the Construction Grant Fund, which is also eligible to private companies. So that same grant funding, which is entirely federal money at this point in time, also goes to private entities as well as communication union districts.
Okay, but those grants are paid for by taxpayers, no matter whether it's federal or state. which it seems like both are, that money is coming from.
Certainly, but my
Yeah.
point is that the open meeting law is you're not here. The open meeting law isn't to protect for federal grant funds, right? The open meeting law is to protect for entities that are spending Vermont taxpayer dollars. That's what the state law is there for. And that's why I think that the exception around if the funds that you're receiving aren't generated by municipal taxing or assessment power, if they're generated by competitive grants that you have replied to RFPs for in competition with private parties, like why should we have a standard put on? And also let's be really clear, like we believe in open meeting. We believe in transparency. We want people to, I would love if more people attended our meetings, frankly. But the reality is that when you have 71 towns and you're 2.5 hours from each other, like, what are we actually doing? You know? And that's why it just seems it's not just convenience, it's time and energy of town officials, of our staff or our volunteers. It's fuel. And again, anyone that wants to have a public meeting can raise their hand and have an in-person public meeting in a place that is much closer to them by simply saying, please provide a public meeting in Berlin or Hardwick or Canaan or Orleans or Jay Peak. So
Thank
we're
you.
not,
Go ahead.
we're not asking to not have physical locations. We're asking to not be mandated to provide a single physical location, but to have the ability to offer a physical location that works for any individual entity, because they are only individual entities, if ever. Like I said, we've really only had two. Then we'll provide the location at their request in an area that's more convenient for them. And of course, they'll still have access to the phone and access to Zoom.
Thank you. I had a lot of the same concerns as Rep. Waters Evans. And I asked for additional testimony, and this has really helped me clarify it to a point. I just want to be very clear that the Vermont Community Broadband Board has in the past received funding from the state for a number of different things, including like innovation grants and connectivity innovation grants and expansion loan programs and municipal planning grants, all of that. You may be beyond that in your course of work right now, but there were Vermont taxpayer dollars being used for broadband.
Sure, that's absolutely fair.
In very recent history.
Yeah.
However, I'm thinking about putting myself in the Northeast Kingdom and wanting to be a part of the decision-making process, or at least to be informed. And I like your option number 2 very much, because instead of me having to drive to Brighton, if I lived on the other corner of the Northeast Kingdom, I would prefer a location that's closer to my home or work that I could get to easily at the appointed time. So for me, that seems like a sensible solution to this issue by choosing option number 2. And it also would apply to other entities like your entity, in particular, the Northeast Kingdom Waste Management District, which has 49 towns over 5 counties. So I feel like this would be, and maybe legal counsel will tell me no, but I feel like this is a more broadly, simply applied interpretation of the law than what currently exists, where you have to have a set physical location that may not be accessible for everybody. And I do appreciate that you always have a phone-in option. There may not always be cell phone service where I'm driving around in the Northeast Kingdom, but if I were to have a location that I could be at, like for instance, outside of the town hall that has one of the little mini cell towers, I could access your meeting by phone if I couldn't get to the physical location in time, if I were delayed or whatever. So I like option number 2, committee, and just wanted to put that out there.
Thanks very much.
Rep Morgan.
Not to beat the dead horse on the monetary component that Rep Waters Evans was speaking to, but agreed that, I mean, anytime federal, whether it's federal tax dollars, state tax dollars, the two are all one and the same, because we are all in this room state taxpayers, but we're also federal taxpayers. So there is a nexus there. I think anytime federal monies, and I'm not trying to get a rogue out of this, but it just that we do need to be very clear and careful about the fact that the two are very intertwined, in my opinion.
And you're also correct that we do, the areas that were mentioned, like the loan expansion program and things like that, we do benefit from those. So you're absolutely correct. It's just that everything that we have benefited from, private companies have also been able to benefit from. So it's not a direct correlation between, one to the other, CUD to the money. It's those monies are available to private companies and have been used by private companies.
Yeah, I just wanted to.
Agreed. It's all public dollars. I agree with that completely.
Yeah, I've just gotten into that with other constituents in the past of that. Well, I got it from the federal government. I said, well, that is you. And so I just wanted to be perfectly clear on that that's me. And I agree with what Rep. Tango said. I think that might be something to look at for us. An option.
Can I ask a question of Tucker?
Oh, please.
Would you mind reminding me or us of why the CUDs fall under open meeting law in the first place?
Tucker Anderson Legislative Council, because they meet the definition of public body very expressly. Yeah, they're a political subdivision of the state. They have governing boards, those boards are subject to the open meeting law.
Just how we built them. Yep.
And we believe we should be subject to the open meeting law, and we believe that the open meeting law is extremely important. There's no question about that. We just also believe that there is a better path towards providing opportunities for people while limiting the expense. And, we may have the grant funding available now to, continue to, as we all move forward, things get tighter, right? And so it's the investments matter, and we'd like to put the investments where they can benefit the people the most.
All right, any other questions for Krista right now?
Thank you for your consideration.
No, thank you very much. I think that was helpful with us, at least trying to find a path to hone something in here. So for the next block of time here, I wanted to bring Tucker up to just maybe we can speak to some of the nuance within this conversation with him, what that may look like. Because I'm just going back to the point that I brought up the last 2 times we've been on this, really got to start deciding what we're going to do for amended language on this over the next couple of days.
Volumes of books.
Good morning, Tucker Anderson Legislative Council. I did in fact bring some of my volumes. They've been annotated for 10 years now. So you can see just a decade of joy or misery, depending on your perspective.
Situationally dependent.
Margins of the green books.
Yeah.
Happy to start wherever the committee would like. One thing that I did want to note is that financial considerations are not the only reason that the open meeting law applies to public bodies. And that's called out expressly not only in the updates in Act 133 with separation that the General Assembly made between advisory bodies and all other public bodies of the state, but also just in the governmental functions that are called out for purposes of understanding what the business of a public body is. And for purposes of understanding Krista's excellent testimony from earlier and the context surrounding the CUDs, CUDs are municipal utilities. They have ratepayers. They have governing boards, the members of which are appointed by the legislative bodies of the member municipalities. They are fundamentally entangled with municipal government in the state. They have, authority to set service rates and fees. They do have public funds that flow through the CUDs for purposes of, for example, their utility infrastructure. And they operate right alongside other municipal utilities that you might be familiar with, municipal electric plants, water and sewer. So they're right there. The service they provide is telecommunication services as opposed to pipes in the ground, but they still have all the same structure. And if you were to take a look at the chapter in Title 30, Chapter 82 that formed the CUDs, and you were to hold that alongside of the Union Municipal District chapter in Title 24, you would find that about 80% of the language in those statutes is exactly the same. And that's because CUDs are a form of Union Municipal District, just like your solid waste management districts and other municipal utilities.
Yeah, that's a very valuable context as to the structure.
As to some of the specific requests and proposals that came up, just want to make sure that my testimony and some of the margin notes that I provided alongside of VCUDA's request that I'm clear on them. The risk in using the definition where you have member municipalities leading to an exception from the physical meeting location requirement is that it may sweep in other forms of districts that, based on your policy considerations, either shouldn't be treated the same as CUDs or maybe shouldn't have this physical meeting location exception. But that's a policy choice for you to make. My recommendation, if you were to go down the line where you're identifying that CUDs are special and particular, is that you just call out CUDs. Instead of attempting to craft a definition based on the member municipalities, it would cast a broader net, CUDs. We just talked about all the other forms of municipal utilities. I'm sure that you could find water utilities that have a sufficient number of member municipalities to meet the threshold requirements. As for the second component, where there's a request for accommodation that currently exists in the open meeting law that was built into Act 133, the timeline that's discussed in the memo that was submitted is actually much tighter and shorter than what exists in the open meeting law currently. The open meeting law requires that a request for an accommodation, AKA please designate a physical meeting location, is 2 business days, which is different from 24 or 48 hours, significantly different if we're looking at, for example, timelines that extend over a weekend. So if your meeting date is a Monday through a Wednesday, the request has to come from a member of the public in the preceding week under the current provisions in the open meeting law. But again, that proposal, policy consideration for the committee to make.
Rebecca?
Thank you. That was good that you reminded us of that because we had a robust discussion last biennium about how to word that. And I would suggest to the committee that we keep it the way it is. And is there a time frame for special meetings, Tucker, that currently exists for a request for a physical location?
So because the announcement time for special meetings is so close to the actual meeting, it's impossible for a member of the public to make a request with that 2 business day build out for a special meeting. Public bodies have to publicly announce, which means they have to give an announcement of the special meeting to media outlets, radio stations, for example, and then have to post a meeting agenda for the special meeting 24 hours before the special meeting is to be held. So the request for accommodation applies under its express terms to regular meetings of public bodies. And even there are some escape clauses for public bodies, including the ability to state that there's an undue burden in providing the accommodation.
I remember that
Mhm.
conversation very well, so thank you for refreshing us on that. So it seems like there probably isn't a great way for a special meeting request to be accommodated within that time frame, particularly if it falls over a weekend when no one is working in the municipality. So that we had a long conversation about that. Back to the member towns, the numbers that are in one of the options, I would suggest not going with a number, but going with these types of organizations. And my question for you, Tucker, is CUDs are considered a municipality, correct? So are things like solid waste districts and water districts also considered a municipality? And is there a umbrella term for those types of municipalities?
Yes, and I'll try to make my fingers work quickly so that I can give you the precise location statute. I believe it's 1 VSA section 127. But I'm checking. If I follow this correctly, I'll give myself a high five if I nailed it. 126.
Wow.
So,
You're gonna
for-
That's a D.
Unless it's more narrowly defined elsewhere in statute, 1 VSA section 126 applies. That's the general definition of a municipality for all Vermont statute. And it includes a city, town, school district, incorporated school or fire district or incorporated village. And then here's the important part, all other governmental incorporated units,
Okay.
which includes all districts.
Okay,
So by default, unless the chapter, subchapter, or section of law more narrowly defines it, municipalities include all forms of districts.
so next question, if we said municipalities in the context of this, would then all of those special requests and no physical location cover towns and cities?
So my suggestion would be make the policy choice first and then craft the language around the policy choice. So have a request from a particular form of district and, an explanation of the reasoning for the request. If you choose to grant that particular form of municipality, CUDs here, or similar forms of municipalities, we can craft a definition that only encompasses those. I would just need to know what the policy choice is. If it's just CUDs, we can just call out the governing chapter for the CUDs. They're covered. If there's something special about the CUDs that other municipal corporations might also have that special quality, we can call out the special quality. Or have a list of references if you know exactly what forms of districts you're looking at. Something that I did want to know, and I forgot to cover it right up front, I've already provided this testimony to the committee for regular meetings. The time and place of the regular meeting has to be in some adopted authority from the public body. Statute, ordinance, rule, resolution, something like that. What does that mean? That means that at a meeting, that body has to, if it's going to have a different designated physical meeting location, they have to adopt at the preceding meeting where and at what time they're going to be meeting next. Typically, what happens is a resolution is adopted, for example, by a legislative body saying that the town legislative body is going to meet on X day at X time in the town hall. For the CUDs, if they're gonna be having like a riding court, like we used to do for the courts back in the day, way back in the day when there were horses and buggies, at a meeting, they would adopt, for example, a resolution stating where the next meeting would be taking place and at what time.
But if we don't have a physical location designated, that goes away.
Yes.
And back to your special quality of municipality versus a specific type, like calling out CUD specifically, if I were to advocate for other types that have the same special quality, is there a terminology for that type of organization that we would use?
Yes, and we would probably, we couldn't call out specific statutory definitions and you wanted it to be as narrow as possible, we would likely craft a new definition. And I could point you to some bills introduced in the past that attempted to define certain types of districts in order to grant privileges to those districts.
I just feel like we're creating all of these districts over the last several years and they should be treated equally, in my opinion. Thank you.
If it wasn't, if it's not difficult to pull some of that old language, I think I personally would be interested in taking a look at it just as a resource and context, yeah. Fair point.
So just to clarify, you'd be looking at potential language to group in organizations that are similar to CUDs for an exemption.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I'm just looking at what we have for options on the table. Yes.
I just feel really uncomfortable with exempting these large entities from open meeting law. I just don't see a way that to get behind it, especially, you know, if we give this one consideration to CUDs and then there are other, as Rep. Whitem pointed out, there are going to be other in the future organizations or municipalities that want to hop on board because they're similar and the same. So why wouldn't we treat them all equally under the law? And then all of a sudden, there are many potentially situations in which these organizations are exempt from open meeting law. And I think inconvenience and cost are a factor in a lot of things. In a small town select board, it's an issue. I think just because nobody goes, it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be an option, because a lot of times, you know, speaking from my own town, we'll have a meeting of a DRB or something and nobody really attends those other than the people in it. But if there's something that happens that gets people riled up, they go in person, they don't just Zoom in. And I think it's really important to have that option available for people, especially if it's public money and especially if there's a way to actually meet. And yes, it's inconvenient and annoying to have somebody sit alone in the town hall. But it's also important that that information, that access is available for all kinds of people. You know, maybe they live far away, maybe they don't, but maybe it's really important for them to get there. And I don't know, I don't see a way around this, honestly. And it sounds kind of worse the more we talk about it. And like, it's gonna
Make your
limit
position
even more.
Abundantly clear. I was just asking him for older content to educate myself on
Yeah, that wasn't directed at you. I was just stating my position. I'm glad that it was made abundantly clear. I hope so. That was my goal.
So,
There are a lot of concerns I have, folks with disabilities, folks with poor media literacy, and you're talking about dialing in a number on Zoom. Like, I've struggled to do that with Vets Caucus before because it's not intuitive. And I worry that if we allow one exemption today, then what stops 10 more tomorrow? And open meeting laws, I think, are like, this is really corny, but like seatbelts for democracy. And they protect us even when we don't expect a crash. And so I just worry that if we're toying around with this, then why don't we just burn the whole open meeting law together? You know, I mean, I don't want to do that, but I'm just saying, I think we're trying to tinker around with something that just a very slippery slope, and it weakens the norms of open government and transparency. And those are the reasons that I'm here to serve and be on this committee. So I'm also just, wildly uncomfortable, and I don't think we should be going into this.
other sentiments from the table before we even consider entertaining more options on this or not?
I mean, I don't mind looking at language. I think that'll be interesting, but I think it's important to play out the what that looks like. If it's language that would include CUDs and solid waste districts and other types of things like that, I guess that seems like a bigger bucket. And yes, it's like hard to anticipate what the controversies would be, but I think it might be more important to have the structure there in case something comes up, because it's hard to claw back later without having this.
Rep. Coffin?
As far as with the CUDs and going back, also what was said, that if you don't have a physical location, or a lot of them don't, they said, as was testified, that 48-hour notice, at least they know that somebody wants to be there. That, yes, we're responsible to the public, and I believe in the open meeting law, but the public should have a responsibility to say, hey, I want to be there. If you don't have a physical location, can you find me one? Or a reasonable area. So I think having that 48-hour notice provision would work. I know I wasn't in on this conversation in the past years, but at least giving the public an option.
Any other thoughts on this piece? I mean, I was just asking Tucker for that stuff so I could educate myself on the conversations of the past. I can always believe that understanding those things on how the current statutes were developed is a valuable resource to continue helping them evolve. Because it's a reminder on why the words exist the way they do.
I agree with that.
Anything else for Tucker right now? Rep. Boyne?
Would you mind repeating what you said earlier about if an organization would like to change their location, the process on that?
Yes, so under the open meeting law, the public body has to have their regular meeting times and locations designated by charter, statute, ordinance, bylaw, rule, or other authority. So that has to be formally adopted by the public body at some point. And that means that if you're going to have a different meeting location in subsequent weeks, that at some point in the preceding weeks, you have to adopt, for example, a resolution stating the time and location of those future regular meetings.
Okay. Yes, please. Sandy.
So last time Tucker, counsel, testified before us, he mentioned that the carve out of the CUDs would be an option. I'm just wondering if maybe we should consider that, take them out of this open meeting thing and have them have their own chapter, how they're handled. That way they're a separate unit and somebody could come back and say, well, we're doing, you know what I'm saying, instead of pinpointing it in one individual organization within the open meeting law. Have CUDs have their own chapter, own section that deals with them, because they're kind of a rare.
No, I understand the thought. Yeah, Rep. Pango.
Yeah, I don't agree with that just because I don't feel that they're rare. I feel that they're very similar to these other types. And my point is, if we carve out for them, we're gonna have to carve out for others. We're gonna get asked to carve out for others. So that's why I put on the table what I did. But I understand that there's a way to do that in the chapter. I'm just not advocating for carving out for one organization.
Brett Boyd.
And just to go off of what Rep. Handler just said, I pulled up the map of the solid waste management entities, and it's very similar to the CUD. So I view this as a slope where we carve out one and we carve out more, and then maybe in the future we have more organizations that are similar, or small organizations grow, and just a lot of exemptions maybe.
I guess that's kind of, that helps highlight like where I feel stuck is that I understand the CUD's position and that it seems like there's very little benefit to what they're doing right now, having the physical location and managing everything else that they're doing. Like I can understand that, but it seems like the only way, like we either have an option of carving out CUDs in statute, or we carve out an entire definition of types of organizations that are like that. And one feels like favoritism and the other one feels like we're capturing too big of a things.
Yeah.
Either.
That's the tricky part. I mean, this is exactly, I mean, this conversation is such a rinse repeat from when we did this, right? So
This is exactly the conversation we had last biennium about school boards. And that's why school boards were not captured in Act 133.
Just remind me, is this the product or child of the COVID? Is that when open meeting laws came out, where they
with the,
with all the hybrid stuff and all that?
Hybrid.
it was us evolving out of the COVID protocols.
I
where it
know
all
open meeting
went.
law's been here for a long time. but
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah. And that's why this is all like 3 years
convoluted
old.
Stuff, this clause from COVID.
And there was an acknowledgement when this stuff moved through the body that in this moment in time, we're gonna have to come back and hear from people and try and figure out if or how to adjust. Rep. Waters Evans, then back to Hango.
Thanks. Rep. Hinz, no, just it's evolves over time, right? So it was very clear in the beginning, no one could go anywhere, like all of this stuff. And then, you know, as I know that you weren't here and as time passed, we are trying to figure out the way to make it the best and most efficient. Also including people, but what I was going to say earlier, it's just that I feel like, yes, we did talk about it before, but it's, you know, it's been a whole other period of time and we have, you know, some fresh perspective in the room. And also, I think, I just think we're at a period in time where we are needing to look out for rural communities. We need to look out for people with disabilities, people who can't afford to have internet or have a cell phone or whatever and have access to these things. And I think it's just really important to preserve these options for now, because we did talk about it before and we did leave it as it was because it was complicated. So I think to just say it was complicated before and it's still complicated now, so we should just do something is not, and I'm not saying that's what anyone's saying. I'm just saying until we really figure it out, I think we need to make sure that access is available to as many people as possible and that should always be our priority. It's my priority. But yeah, it was a mess and it still seems sort of messy, but also seems clear to me that until we come up with a solution that's not messy, then we just kind of leave it slightly messy. You know?
Yeah.
I just wanted to,
Oh, sorry, yes.
yeah, I just wanted to answer something that Rep. Pincinel brought up, is that COVID did cause us to do some things that were a little out of the ordinary. But what we learned from that is that we have more participation by offering electronic means, greater participation, more
Yes.
people are participating in democracy because of that. And we have learned, even though I've been asked repeatedly, get rid of the electronics, get rid of the digital access. We have learned that we cannot do without it. And we probably shouldn't do without it. And I'm going on the record by saying that it is very important for certain populations to be able to access meetings electronically. And that's what makes this messy, is that we do have that knowledge now that we didn't have before COVID. So it's been a very interesting time to have been here pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID.
An interesting arc to say the least, yes. All right, we have some more testimony at 11. You don't want to take a break for a couple of minutes. Is there anything else immediately right now for Tucker or anyone else? So we're still noodling on this stuff. And we'll just take a pause for 15, 20 minutes.